Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today, wherever you may be. We want to thank you for making us part of your leadership journey and for subscribing to receive this, what we feel is a very important webinar for leaders at all levels of an organization. So, again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Marcel Schwantes. I'm managing principal and founder of Leadership from the Core. We're in the business of servant leadership development, and we do that through executive coaching, leadership training, assessment, and online learning. Our core purpose as a company is to create healthy and engaged cultures that lead to high performance and bottom line success. And we do that through the timeless principle of servant leadership. Well, I'm excited about this presentation, so let's get started. Our presentation today is twofold. We're going to learn about why people leave managers in our current economy and what the current workforce wants in those people in leadership roles, in whatever level of management you find yourself in. If you're in a leadership role, it's probably becoming evident by now that the millennial generation, or Generation Y, is kind of taking over the global workforce. Here in the US last year, 2015, millennials became the largest share of the American workforce. That's according to the Pew Research Center. And now it's estimated that by beginning of next decade, 75% of workers globally will be born between 1980 and the year 2000. So why am I mentioning this right off the bat? Well, the best leaders I have witnessed over the years, they're committed to continued development. And so over time, their leadership evolves to meet the needs of each generation. Have you noticed how drastically different, say, a millennial needs to be led versus a baby boomer? So millennials are a different breed of worker. I think we might agree on this, and so we have to adapt right now to the ways we lead and engage this unique generation. And so as you identify your high potentials for leadership roles, it's important to understand that people should not be promoted on merit or seniority, but on leadership competencies such as trust, empathy, sharing the vision, developing others, and delegating authority. But I'm jumping a little bit ahead. We're going to talk about some of these things. I'm going to start off today with a profound statement by Gallup CEO Jim Clifton. He says, "Here's something they probably never teach you in business school. The single biggest decision you make in your job, bigger than all the rest, is who you name manager. When you name the wrong person manager, nothing fixes that bad decision. Not compensation, not benefits, nothing." And that's really where it starts. And the research seems to back it up as well. According to Gallup research, most people quit for really a number of explainable reasons, but the reasons people leave might not be what most bosses think. And many think that it's about the money, right? Money is important, but it doesn't buy employee loyalty. As you can see from this graph, only 22% of respondents actually mentioned it. The most common answer was for career advancement or promotional opportunities. Another 20% said that they lack job fit, 17% because of management or the general work environment, and then some other smaller percentages due to flexibility or scheduling or job security. But look at this graph closely at the reasons. Do you notice a pattern? At least 75% of the reasons for voluntary turnover are things that managers can influence. And managers who can't or won't alter the factors that drive turnover, well, they can expect to be writing those job ads sometime in the near future. And there are other predictors for turnover as well. Gallup found that when expectations are unclear, when there's inadequate materials or resources, and little opportunities for progress and development, there's going to be trouble. This is the number one predictor of future turnover. There are other indicators too. Workers often say they don't fit their job, that their coworkers aren't committed to quality, and there you have the case for pay. and that they're not connected to the purpose of the organization or to senior management. And as you can imagine, this accounts for about 80% of turnover, which can be attributed to the direct manager. And turnover is also expensive. Some recent estimates say it can cost a company somewhere between $45,000 up to $150,000 to replace an employee. And many companies, they just aren't set up to have that kind of budget to take that on. So the beauty of Gallup's research is that it shows companies, where to look for problems. It gives us clues to how those problems can be corrected if managers have the courage to fix them. And it starts with what Jim Clifton said. Who do you have in your management roles, and who are you promoting to be your future managers and leaders? So for the rest of this presentation, we're going to really zoom in on what the best leaders avoid doing to keep leading at a high level and to avoid the turnover that we see in the literature. This is the focus of our discussion today. I'm going to highlight 8 common mistakes those in positions of management make to really blow it with their employees. So if any of these reasons strike a chord with you as a leader, it's never too late to make a change. So here we go. Number 1 is not recognizing the unique strengths and talents beyond what's on a job description and how that translates to high performance. This is certainly an engagement killer. People love to use their unique talents and gifts, so the best leaders will leverage close relationships with employees by finding out what their strengths are and then bringing out the best in their employees. The research is saying that turnover is lower when managers adjust jobs based on individual talents and strengths. In fact, organizations that select people who psychologically fit their jobs, in these companies, 20 to 40% fewer employees actually quit than in companies that don't select and develop for strengths. In fact, when managers help employees develop through their strengths and natural talents, they are more than twice as likely to engage their team members. The second common mistake that leads to turnover is a lack of communication. Employees whose managers hold regular meetings with them are almost 3 times as likely to be engaged as employees whose managers do not hold regular meetings with them. But mere transactions between managers and employees, they're not enough. See, employees value communication from their manager, not just about the job or the task at hand, but also about what happens in their lives outside of work. What the studies are saying is that employees who feel as though their manager is invested in them as people are more likely to be engaged. Now, communicating also means consistently inspiring and motivating people by clarifying goals and expectations. Great leaders provide leadership by setting goals and then keeping people abreast of those goals over time, because sometimes things change. So, do your people know what is expected of them? This is one of the top 5 reasons that we've already seen why employees are disengaged and then why things go south, not having clear goals and expectations. And the other thing I want to touch on about communicating goals and expectations is the importance of defining goals in the short term as well as the long term. So help your workers to see the context of their role and their work on a micro level, how the small stuff matters, and then connect all of that on a macro level and let them see the big picture. So clarify for them how what they do fits in with these contexts. Now, one of the best practices that leads to higher engagement in communication is one-on-one conversations for your team members to spend time with you and learn more about their projects and for you to learn more about them, to identify opportunities where they could perhaps contribute more to the team or the project. Nothing influences motivation more than the relationship a manager has with their workers. Now, I know some of you are probably going, Marcel, how in the world am I going to find the time? I mean, I have a large team. That's what email is for, right? Well, the good news is that we're not talking about the kind of meetings that you see in conference rooms that that need to be scheduled in 1 hour blocks 2 weeks in advance. One-on-one meetings become time savers when used on a recurring basis. But you need to know how to structure them so that it works to your advantage. This is going to test your leadership skills. So I'm going to offer you these 5 tips for getting started. One is make one-on-one meetings short. They don't have to be any longer than 15 minutes. The shorter, the better. If you're in a virtual environment, use video conferencing, not just a phone, because it's important to see the other person's face and pick up body language and cues like that. The second thing is it's the manager that sets the meeting date and time. That shows you have an interest in them, and it tests your follow through skills and your commitment. And of course, you want to be prompt. If they request a meeting and you respond 2 weeks later, well, guess what? Your credibility goes out the window. The next thing is it's the team member, the employee, that provides the agenda. Well, why do I say this? Because it puts the focus on them and pushes the responsibility on them to tell you what they need to address, what they want to talk about. So let your employee drive that meeting by giving you an agenda. The next thing is meet at least once every 2 weeks, if possible, and of course, depending on the level of responsibility for that worker and the size of your team, if you can, meet weekly, but use your best judgment. And the last thing is focus on what the employee wants to talk about. They brought you the agenda. This is their time. When they're done, ask if there's anything else that needs to be addressed, ask if they have everything they need, and then you can communicate your part. New expectations, good news, bad news, praises. And lastly, and I didn't put it up there on the slide, but please show your employees that these meetings are valued and important by treating them as a priority. The third mistake managers make that lead to turnover, when this is done repeatedly and intentionally, is hoarding information. Here's the real reason leaders hoard and withhold information. It's about power and control. And control is one of the most effective ways to kill trust. So a leader hoarding information to control his or her environment and the people in it cannot be trusted. The reverse of this is a leader who acts responsibly by sharing information and being transparent with their team. Speaking of transparency, now there are 2 types. There's personal transparency and then there's organizational transparency. So why does transparency matter? Well, it's important for a few reasons, but the most important one is that transparency is the backbone of trust. Any leader that wants to have a better relationship with their people needs to understand how important transparency is. If you've read Patrick Lencioni's masterpiece, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, if you don't have that book yet, please run to your bookstore and buy it today. You already know that the foundation for any good relationship is trust. It's the foundation for his pyramid model, right? Trust is at the bottom of the pyramid. And that foundation of trust cannot happen without transparency. In building trust, that's where transparency happens. As a result, your people will work harder for you. They will respect you more, and you'll be able to solve problems much faster if you're being transparent. And leaders need to learn to ask for feedback on how they're doing as part of being transparent. So often we skate around what we're truly trying to say, or how others truly feel about our leadership performance. We have these conversations where we're not really getting to the bottom of the issue. we're afraid of what we're going to hear because the response might be painful. But if we're courageous enough to be transparent, then we can reach our end results much quicker. This makes business sense to me. So it's important to know the status and condition of those team members under your care. So to find out what's going on with them and how they feel about things, what if you ask them the following questions? If you had to use one word to describe your work experience, what would it be and why? Or maybe you could have those one-on-one 15-minute conversations to ask something like, what's the one thing as your leader I could do to make you feel better about your job and help you be more productive? Or perhaps this question, is there anything that we could change that would make things go better for you at getting your work done? See, by asking these questions, we can get to the heart of those we lead. We can learn what's really going on with them and how we can better serve them and be more productive. So how about it? Do you really know what's going on with your team? Now, we've been talking about personal transparency. Let's transition and talk about organizational transparency. From a business standpoint on financial performance, take note of the research on how transparency is linked to the bottom line. Warren Bennis, Daniel Goleman, and James O'Toole, they wrote a book called Transparency, Creating a Culture of Candor. And Bennis goes on to say, again and again, studies show that companies that rate high in transparency tend to outperform more opaque ones. And he cites a 2005 study finding that a group of 27 U.S. companies noted as most transparent actually beat the S&P 500 by 11.3%. So how do leaders operate with organizational transparency? Well, the challenge with this is who's defining the behaviors. It may be different between companies, teams, and departments. So let me suggest a baseline for organizational transparency, and that is the sharing of information. See, information is power, and it's one of the best ways to build a sense of trust in people. Sharing information, sometimes means disclosing information, right? That may be considered privileged, sensitive information on important topics such as future business plans and strategies, financial data, your competition's best practices. Providing people with more complete information communicates trust and a sense of, hey, we're all in this together. Let me illustrate one example with a case study. This company redefined what it means to be transparent in business. They're now being recognized as one of the greatest company cultures, and a lot of other companies are looking up to these guys for inspiration. And I believe transparency is one of the biggest reasons for their success. And I speak of HubSpot, the global digital marketing company. One of the many things they do to embrace transparency is they have this public wiki that anyone at any level inside the company can see. And any person can go in there and voice their opinion or even put up a blog with questions, concerns, ideas. This is such a great platform for collaboration and encouraging communication between any employee and upper management. So think about what you can create in your own spheres of influence for a forum that encourages the flow of information. HubSpot employees actually they really value the accessibility of its management team. In fact, they've won awards for this. And a couple of years ago, their co-founder and chief technology officer, Darvish Shah, he published an article in their wiki called Ask Darvish Anything. This guy is a self-proclaimed introvert, so he gets that despite how open and accessible he thinks he is, he may not seem very approachable at all to some other employees because of, he's an introvert by nature. So perception is reality, right? And so his public wiki page encourages anyone to ask him anything. The question can be about technology, strategy, product, culture, whatever. Darvish will do his best to answer it as long as it does not harm someone else. So if you're wondering what you can do to put these principles into practice, let me offer you 6 key behaviors or habits you want to form that will help you get started, and I hope you have pen and paper handy. Number 1 is you got to be accessible. You got to be out in front of the line or out in the open, sharing plans for the future, communicating important things to your people. Don't hide behind closed doors, or even worse, don't delegate these important things to someone else. Your employees will look to you for information on what's going on. I had one manager years ago, an executive that I reported to, who always came to us to make sure that we had what we needed, to make sure that I understand the process of a large project. He was always visible, always in my line of sight. It was great because I felt cared for, and I wanted to go to bat for him during crunch time. You want to acknowledge that people have concerns. It's human nature. So exercise your listening skills and make time to hear concerns and anxieties that people may have. So you want to make sure you create opportunities for dialogue. You want to make sure you follow through. If you don't know the answer to a question immediately and you say you're going to get back to your employee by a certain time, well, make sure you do so. Keeping your word on even the small things demonstrates that your people can depend and rely on you. So that when big things come down the pipe, well, now they can trust that you're going to be there, that you'll do what you say you will. This is really important for building credibility as a manager, especially with new employees during the onboarding process. Given the bigger picture, one way to engage your team members is to give them perspective about what they're doing. I mean, I venture to guess that some of your staff will probably be given some pretty boring, mundane tasks, right? So communicate how that ties into how it applies to the bigger picture, the end goals, the company mission. No matter what they're doing, let your team members know the larger context, not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it. Transparency in this context is really about your employees saying, hey, I trust the future. This is about future confidence. And lastly, but not least, of course, is just keep the lines of communication open. And this encompasses all the other things we mentioned. Let me prove how these things work in real life, okay? Fortune magazine puts out their annual 100 Best Companies to Work For issue. 92% of employees surveyed at these companies believe that management is transparent in its business practices. Here's how they live it daily. This is part of these companies' cultures. They keep the lines of communication open. They share their vision for the future with their employees. They take the pulse of the organization by constantly listening and responding to what they hear so they can serve the needs of their people. And they offer employees opportunities for training and development. The fourth mistake managers make that leads to turnover is micromanaging. See, micromanagers operate their way because it's about power, and power is about control. Don't let them fool you by making you believe it's to keep things from going bad, or because they want to ensure things are done the right way as the experts. So how do you avoid a micromanaged environment? First off, are you putting the focus on your team members by developing them, training them properly? And do you have an engaging onboarding process? One that is, by my recommendation, at least 6 months to a year long for your new hires to get them acclimated, but also that it puts emphasis on developing them. Secondly, are you giving your staff feedback? And equally important, are you listening to feedback that's going to further support staff needs and even improve yourself, not to mention your business, as a leader? And lastly, Are you allowing them to give input, to express their creativity and ideas, and allowing them to make decisions on their own? In other words, I'm going to use this expression a lot. Are you pumping the fear out of the room? See, leaders who dominate people and decisions and processes are seen as very controlling and self-centered. And so what happens is creativity, innovation, morale, and performance are stifled in the long run. So when managers lead by fear, that approach is never sustainable. The fifth mistake they make that leads to turnover is when they fail to listen. Sounds like a no-brainer, right? But I'm not talking about sitting there in front of someone and giving that person attention and nodding your head. No. Let me put this into a business context. When a manager fails to listen to the collective voice of the team in pursuing a vision, in completing an important project, chances are team members will not feel cared for, respected, or valued. So, like when a manager doesn't solicit the opinion of others, especially during change or a time of crisis, because the change is often scary. When that happens, trust begins to erode, and then morale starts to go in the tank. So we're talking about a leader that has to stop getting the last word, a leader that allows for others to give input to important initiatives. And the only way to do that is to first listen. I can't stress enough the importance of listening, because it's such a crucial yet so frequently absent in leaders who are thinking more about themselves than thinking about the needs of others. The sixth mistake is not making themselves available. We touched on this earlier with the illustration about creating margin for meeting one-on-one. Because here's what happens. When your staff starts to notice that you're booking unnecessary meeting after meeting after meeting while spending less one-on-one time with them, you're sending a message you don't care about those team members. That's what's coming across to them. So create margin and build in time. Remember the 15-minute rule once or twice per week? Or you can block off time for team members to drop by and ask questions, to address concerns, or just to check in. The seventh mistake is leading from a position of power or ego. In so many of our surveys and exit interviews that we've conducted, we get responses from employees complaining about know-it-all managers as the cause of a lot of conflict and grief. One respondent called it intellectual arrogance. Leaders who think they have the best ideas and answers and use it to wield power or control, that leader is going to suck the life out of their teams. What we have found in our data is this general desire for leaders who demonstrate humility. People don't want leaders who are not able to be wrong, and leaders not handling being wrong well. Those leaders are less likely to be respected and trusted. So in developing humility in a business sense, which is why you should do it, leaders need to accept perhaps a learning opportunity from others. They need to ask for help to really show themselves as a real human being. Maybe even reach out to someone younger or less experienced that has a skill or expertise that's unfamiliar to them, so that you can learn from them. When this type of humility is demonstrated, it's going to drive respect and loyalty in their leadership to new levels. Employees are going to respond and engagement will soar. And finally, certainly not least, we come to reason number 8, and that is not valuing their people. They either don't care, they don't know how to care, or maybe at some point they stopped caring. In essence, it might be the leader who thinks anyone is replaceable, right? Or they might see employees as cogs on a wheel instead of seeing them as worthy colleagues or employees to be treated like business partners in producing excellence and good work. So you want a productive workplace? Here's what you need to do. You create an environment in which people feel safe. Safe enough to experiment, to challenge you, to exercise their creativity and strengths, and to give opinions. So in this type of workplace, it feels more like a community because it's safe to disagree and give the manager the benefit of the doubt because fear has been pumped out of the room. And managers, they're going to care enough for their employees for these things to happen. So here are some things you need to do to reverse the message going out there, hey, we don't value you. You might want to write these down. 2 that stand out for me, we've already covered, but I'm going to refresh it again because I think it's that important. Investing in employees with development and mentoring opportunities. Remember, great leaders, they show an interest in their people's jobs and career aspirations. So they look into the future to create learning and development opportunities, right? They find out what motivates their best people by getting to know their desires, what's going to drive them. And this is about emotional engagement. It's getting them from the neck up. And then, of course, number 2 is create an environment of trust where risks are taken and employees feel safe and motivated to exercise their creativity. Leaders like this, they're going to work hard to promote trust, where employees feel safe to communicate ideas openly, to provide input to major decisions without reprimand, because there's trust there. But trust, folks, is a two-way street, right? It's a two-way street. So leaders trust and believe in the people that they lead as well. And so in this sense, they extend trust as a gift, even before having to earn the trust of other people. So in closing today, please remember this. Eliminating many of these things as a manager or leader is going to open up all kinds of doors for you and your team to perform at a high level and to keep people from leaving you. But it all starts with looking within yourself first. Having great self-awareness is the first step to define your present reality, and then figure out from there what leadership behaviors need to be learned and practiced. That concludes today's presentation. I want to thank you so much for joining us, and I sincerely hope this brought you some value. But before you go, if you did come here through an email subscription, I want to make sure you know that we're going to send you a lot of really good stuff. All of our blog updates, a lot of resources, more free webinars and teleseminars, and other tools to support you in your leadership journey. And one last thing, if you like what you heard today and you want to dig deeper into our premium stuff, our premium content, no upsell here, I promise. But we do want to honor those of you serious enough to pursue more learning and development. If that's you, please expect an email within the next day with an offer to fully immerse yourself in our secret sauce. This is our methodology for creating great servant leaders and great cultures. It's our first webinar in a series of premium content. So look for that email from us coming soon. I think what you'll get for the price is going to be hard to beat. If you'd like to get in contact with me, I would love to hear from you. You can write me at info@coachmarcel.com. Let me know how you liked today's webinar. Follow me also on Twitter at Marcel Schwantes. And if you'd like to learn more about our servant leadership training courses, our coaching programs, or what our process is like for culture change, you can visit us at leadershipfromthecore.com. Thank you so much for attending. Have a pleasant day.